Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. For those of you who've been following some of these episodes, I think it's pretty clear by now that I really like to talk about deep stuff. And and I think that is, reviewing these kinds of profound topics is an important reflection in how we really go about our day-to-day lives to truly support our well-being and live fulfilling lives, not necessarily just in fulfilling in the sense of accomplishing things on the external world and having meaningful jobs and things like that, meaningful tasks and volunteering and obviously all those things are very good, but meaningful in the sense of our inner life and how we can feel a sense of satisfaction and contentment with our inner life. And the topic today is about death because our general Western society tends to push away the concept of death. We kind of put it aside. We kind of all know it's something that's going to happen, but it's not really something we're going to talk about. It's not something that's a pleasant topic of discussion. But in my view, the idea of death is highly important. And, at this point in my life, I'm about mid-aged. So, why talk about death? Statistically speaking, all probabilities point to the fact that I'll live for a couple more decades before my time comes. So, why bother talking about it? Why should I reflect on death at this point in my life where my body is still relatively strong and healthy? But bringing death right up close, in my understanding of these things, is very beneficial for many reasons that we'll get into. But first, we'll start with a little story. It's a little fictional story. So, it's a story about a man who died and went to the gates of heaven. And when he got there, God said to him, "Well done, sir, you made it. You can now enter through the gates and go into heaven." And this guy said to God, and this man said to God, "Well, what do I do here? What's heaven like?" Was God's like, "Well, whatever you want. It's whatever you want, whatever you think, whatever you want to see happen will happen." And so the man started off his time in heaven and at first just began to explore all the sort of sensual pleasures that he could imagine. The best food, all the most kind of, explored his sexual life and all the sexual pleasures he could encounter. And he went into all sorts of pleasures for his body to the most, detailed pleasures of satisfaction that you could ever imagine that would ever be possible on earth. He explored those and far beyond in this heavenly realm. And he did this for 100 years until finally it kind of became dull and repetitive and didn't really seem to get much satisfaction out of sort of physical bodily pleasures. So eventually he moved on and sort of saw himself with friends and people and close relationships and laughed and had these great times accompanied by some of the nicest people in the world and just really great conversations and very nice social interactions that he did that for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, and was just around so many people and felt a great time. But eventually that kind of became also a bit repetitive and it kind of became the same conversations and he kind of lost a little bit of the joy of it. And so he went on to explore the earth and explored everything, explored the inside and outside the earth. He went to the earth's core. He saw every possible landscape on planet Earth. He saw all the creatures. His curiosity just was completely satisfied in terms of seeing everything the earth has to offer and understanding all the mysteries of how the earth works and all the animals and all the creatures and did everything there. And that went on for about 1,000,000 years. And then until he knew every little thing about the earth. And then that too was like, oh, okay. So he looked to the heavens and explored the galaxy and all the other galaxies and saw different planets, all these wondrous worlds that he had never could have even imagined. And this went on for 10 million years. And even then, the galaxies were, all explored in great detail. And then he would look to the heavens even higher up and went to the realm of archangels and how they fashion different planets and different galaxies and the rhythm of all these great archangel beings and how they help shape the physical reality of different beings, and was part of this wondrous sort of world of great creativity and power that he was amongst them for millions and millions and millions of years. But even that sort of became this sort of cyclical, repetitive pattern that he got accustomed to. And eventually, this profound sort of loneliness, or just this sense of not knowing what to do next, like he felt like he had seen everything, and he was, this sense of this feeling became overwhelming to him, that eventually he went back to God and said, God, can I please die for real this time? And then God said to him, yes, of course. Everybody asks for this eventually. That's the end of the story. So it's just a bit of a metaphorical thing to point out that we sort of cling to this idea of sort of moving away from death when we talk about our belief systems, as this sort of idea that we want to continue on, that continuation is better than death. But in a way, you think about continuing forever. Is that really better? Is that really better to continue forever? But anyways, that's a bit of an idea to discuss here. Is when we ask, a lot of the times when we discuss death, we wonder, well, what's going to happen after death? What happens when I die? And the real answer that I'm going to say is, I have no idea, and nobody else does. It's really, nobody can claim authority in terms of what happens after death. That's why it's this internal mystery of, what happens to the consciousness that seems to be this mind-body complex, when eventually oxygen stops going to the brain and the brain stops. What's going to happen to me? So that question is sort of at the heart of the mystery around death, and why we sort of feel a bit fearful around it. So, but let's review first what we do know about death, because what happens after death, I don't think I'm even going to go there, because I really don't know. But what do we do know about death? And there's a few interesting points that I think are worth considering. Number one is, when the time comes to die, when the actual moment of the body transitioning and the, whatever you want to call it, life force or oxygen in the cells, or when the body is actually dying, all the evidence we have suggests it's a very pleasant process, that it's actually quite pleasant. Now, I'm not talking about the suffering, the disease and suffering that can occur leading up to death. That's not what we'll put that aside, and we'll come around to that in a moment. I'm talking about when the moment of death has arrived and the transition is beginning to you are dying. That those who have come close to those encounters where they actually touched it, people have come back from drowning, people whose heart has stopped while their brain was rapidly deoxygenating, all those near-death experiences have a universal report of a very pleasant experience. Now, different people will report different things. Some people say they walked to a light, they saw Jesus, or some people saw, other religious figures. And I think, in my view, a lot of what you see in those moments and what you recall afterwards is highly dependent on your cultural and religious background. And so the atheists will say, well, it's nothing more than the, oxygen deprivation of the brain that causes this sense of euphoria. Okay. And the religious person will say, well, it's because the veil between this world and the next becomes very thin, so you can see a little bit on the other side, and it's very beautiful. And so very different versions of sort of what happens there. But needless to say, even the most staunch atheist will have to admit that whatever does happen in that moment, that instant of death, is actually quite pleasant. It's, even if it's just the oxygen the brain becoming euphoric because of some rapid deoxygenation, well, it's still euphoric. It's still very pleasant. Many accounts of people drowning that have been able to be saved and return to life, that once the initial panic of drowning has passed, and the water's gone into the lungs, and the brain, the body's dying very quickly because of drowning, that once that panic has passed, that it becomes actually a very pleasant experience. Those who have died of hypothermia in the winter, they becomes warm and sleepy when the time comes to just fall asleep forever. So for the most part, we have very good reason, empirically, from an observational scientific perspective, we have very good reason to believe that when the moment comes, it'll be very pleasant. And I've had a personal experience, not from a near death. I've not had a near death experience, but I do practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from time to time. And I have one time had an experience where I was wrestling with a partner who's quite good, and he got me in a nice solid chokehold, and I didn't really feel it because he didn't choke my trachea per se, but he squeezed my carotid arteries. And usually when that happens without your throat, you don't feel it very much. But needless to say, I went to sleep. I was wrestling one moment and the next trying to get out of a chokehold, and the next thing I was gone. And that was a particularly weird day for me. We had a beautiful, nice gentleman who lived in our neighborhood who had died of a sudden heart attack. He was young. He was in his 50s. Very tragic. And a lot of people in our neighborhood really liked him. So it was just a bizarre day for the whole neighborhood of a very loved member of our community who had suddenly died. And, like everybody else, it kind of affected me. I was in a very sort of thoughtful mood that day of thinking about death and all that. And so I go to this jiu-jitsu class and I'm wrestling with this guy and I go to sleep. And what I remember is not the specifics, but I do remember when I was asleep or put to sleep temporarily, because my brain rapidly lost oxygen from oxygenated blood from my carotid arteries going to my brain. I felt very good. It was a very pleasant space. It was very peaceful there. And I think I was told I was out for 10, 15 seconds. And when I came to, once I was back in this world, then the kind of humanly fear kind of came up, was like, because I've had heard of this guy who had a heart attack, I thought it was like, did I just have a heart attack? Like what just happened? And then my buddy who had just choked me out or just put me to sleep, he just looked at me. He's like, you just went to sleep. And then, everything kind of came to again. And I was like, yeah, all right. I just got put to sleep. And that's all it was. So the fear came once I was back in this world, but being in that, put to sleep world, or I was kind of out of it, was very pleasant. And it seemed to match all the testimonials of people that have gone closer, much closer than I did there, but kind of a very similar feeling, very pleasant, kind of warm, very comfortable, peaceful feeling. So again, all the evidence points that actual death itself, the experience of it, is likely quite pleasant when the moment comes. So then why do we fear death? What is it about us, our civilization, particularly in the West, that we tend to no, it's not, it's almost morbid. It's morbid to talk about death. Why should we talk about death? And, I guess one thing that people say sometimes is, well, I don't fear death. I fear suffering, which, yes, that can be obviously human civilization is fraught with horrific examples of people dying in tremendous agony, torture, war, and lots and terrible things that have happened. Yes. However, we have progressed in many ways. There's a lot of problems still. I don't want to be too rosy, but in my view, I've dealt a lot in palliative care. I've seen quite a few people die in my career. And with them in modern medicines that we have, I can't say it's that common that even with severe chronic illness of many kinds or terminal illnesses, that we have, that we suffer horrendously. There are very good medicines. There are very good treatments. There are very good ways to alleviate physical suffering when people approach the time of death, even if it's weeks ahead, months ahead. So this idea that I don't really quite buy it when people say, I don't fear death. I just fear the pain that comes with death. I'm like, meh. Yes, there could be some discomfort, but for the most part, we're getting pretty good at managing that in medicine. So what are we really afraid of? What is it that creates this angst inside us? Because I've seen people like, old men and women in their 90s, still like dying. Oh my gosh, dying. And like they're in the 90s. Like, what do you expect's going to happen here? This thing's going to happen, and it's going to happen to all of us, guaranteed. So, I think it comes down to, again, the sense of the end of existence, the end of me, the idea that there will be an end to the narrative of the story that is this me thing, this sense of me that will be no more. And that's frightening for I guess you can call it our little egos, our little sense of me wants to exist and continue on forever. And the concept of it, the concept of the me stopping, ending, is a scary thought. But again, there's some fascinating things around that too, because when we go to sleep every night, essentially that's what we crave. We talk about, yes, we want to recover, we're tired, we want to go to sleep, but really a good sleep, if you have a really good sleep, is where you cease to exist, where the sense of me, of existence, of existing, everything just vanishes, completely vanishes into the void. And that's a good sleep. Okay, that's what you go to bed and you put your head down, and just let yourself go into that beautiful void. We crave that every night. And when we don't have it, when we have a fretful sleep where we're awake most of the time and we can sense ourselves most of the night, and we awake and there we are and we're in our heads and we go back and we try to fall asleep, it's like a bad sleep. And in extreme situations where we really can't sleep, it can literally make us crazy. And with enough no sleep, you can literally kill people with sleep deprivation. Very extreme cases, obviously. But not having regular pattern, a regular cycle of the me stopping to exist throughout our entire lives, if we lack that, if we don't have that beautiful moment where we cease to exist every night, our health goes down. We don't feel as good. We crave it. So again, what is it about the death? Because, I was talking to my aunt about this. We had a really great discussion. It's like, well, yeah, but sleep is different because you're going to wake up in the morning. Okay. And it's like, yes, that is true, because we have the pattern. We have the memories of us waking up. We have we have the anticipation. We have the memories of wake up in the morning. We have the anticipation that the next future morning we'll wake up. So we have this story in our head that it's going to be okay. But then the story of death is different. It's like, oh, that's different. No, that's going to be the end. The void will be different that time. But when we go into the void every night, into nothingness, that's good though. That feels fantastic. But death, whoa, I don't know about that, but it's just a story in our head. It's just a different narrative. It's a different story of one where we're never going to wake up again, and one where we will. And that seems important to the sense of me. The other interesting thing is that, they're at New York University, in particular Johns Hopkins, they've done a lot of interesting studies about the use of psychedelics, in particular psilocybin, for the treatment of existential anxiety. So that is for people who have been given a terminal diagnosis. So they are dying. They have a bad prognosis, maybe a couple months, couple weeks to live, based on some form of terminal illness. And because of that, they're obviously, sometimes for many people, are worried and anxious that they're dying. Existential anxiety, very common for people with terminal diagnosis. And they found that if you give people psilocybin and you can induce a mystical experience. Now, I'll talk about psychedelics in a different episode, but I don't want to get too much into it. But simply to say that when through a proper clinical application of psilocybin to people in a controlled setting with proper screening and all the proper measures, you can often, for these people, induce what they call a mystical experience. And that's a very mystical experience under a very clear criteria called the Hood Mysticism Scale. It's a very clear, sort of definable experience that many people can have, where they feel a sense of oneness, many of the topics we've talked about. and a great sense of connection to all of life, a sense of timelessness, which will be another topic for this podcast, a sense of joy, a deep sense of that everything's okay, a connection to the universe, a sense of oneness. There's all these kind of criteria of people of what people describe during having this experience and afterwards, and to see if somebody actually had a mystical experience, because not everybody who is given psilocybin necessarily has a mystical experience, but it's inducing the mystical experience that is important for the treatment in terms of existential anxiety. And once people feel the mystical experience, they tend to report that their existential anxiety has diminished greatly or even dissipated completely. So that's also very interesting, that once they connected to something greater than themselves, once the story of me fell away in a profound level, that the idea of death takes on much less importance. And so we return to the analogy that we've talked about many times, the story of me, then how the me is like the wave. The little wave, if it thinks it's only the wave, then yes, it's very scary, because the wave comes and goes, and if it's only the wave, then its existence will come to an end, and that'll be that. So for the little wave that only thinks it's a wave, death can be very scary. But for the wave that knows itself as the wave and the ocean, it knows that the wave is very temporary, but can feel itself as its own sense of self is a much more profound and deeper thing than the form of the wave, or in this case, the physical form we take on, that there's something deeper to who we are than just this physical form. Even our sense of individuality, our sense of little me, my little story, that there's something that we're connected to that doesn't have a beginning or an end. It's just deeply profound and timeless. And again, we'll return to the concept of timelessness and maybe how to poke at that concept another time. But that for the most part, our fear of death is more related to the fear of the me ending. And in spiritual traditions, they say the key to life is to die before you die. And that may be a bit of a drastic terminology, but the idea of learning to undo a little bit the sense of me, learning to not have the sense of me being so dominant in our minds, and exploring or feeling a connection, a sense of who I am as something beyond the little me in my head and this body. I'm this body, I'm these thoughts in my head, I'm this person with this history, and I was born on such and such a date, and so on and so forth. That all those things they're part of the game, they're part of the beauty of the existence. It's not to deny them, but that it's just one dimension of it, that the wave will come and the wave will go, but the ocean always has been and always will be. And when we can feel ourselves that way, then the importance of death becomes, so it's like, what happens to the wave after it goes back to the ocean? It's like, who knows? Does it come back as another wave? I guess that's one way to look at it. Does it exist in this beautiful realm forever afterwards? I'm like, maybe, I guess. Does it cease to exist? I guess in a way too. So all these ideas, is it reincarnation? Is it the end, as atheists say? Is it heaven, as many religions propose, or hell, for God forbid, as many religions propose? Like, who knows? But what the spiritual teachers tell us is that when we connect today, in this life, right now, in this very, existence of the present moment, on a deeper level with ourselves, death has much less of an importance, because there's something in us, something where we are, that is timeless. It's never began and never end and will never end. And the meaning of death, kind of loses importance and heaviness. So that's all for today. Just wanted to explore a little bit of that topic of death today, folks. I think it's okay to keep death real close, because when we can, the saying is like, to embrace death is to embrace life. That death and life are actually part of the same coin, like different. So if we push away death, we're actually pushing away life. If we bring death really close and look at it and peek at it and ponder upon it, then it allows us to truly embrace life in a deeper sense of joyousness that we can bring into our everyday lives. So thank you all for those who listen to this. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.